Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. And I'm extremely excited to be joined by Amy Lundy, and we're going to be breaking down and rounding up the US Open 2022. Of course, we have our two champions: 19-year-old Carlos Alcaraz on the men's side, 21-year-old Iga Swiatek on the women's side. The two very young players, but two extremely exciting young talents as well. And we're going to talk not just about the champions, but also the tournament as a whole. Before we get into it, Amy, how are you doing? And how was your trip to the US Open as well?
I'm tired. I don't know about you, but I'm just sort of like a zombie. Even though there was really only one match yesterday that I watched and had to sort of cover, this is the toughest one for me because maybe because it's in my backyard. There's a lot of people from all over the world that come and visit and want to connect and say hello. I have professional obligations. I have friends that want to go out there, and you don't want to miss anything, and you don't want to miss all the great matches. And as we saw this year, so many of the primo matches ended in the middle of the night locally. And I mean, I for one, I just couldn't do it. I have two children. I have, obligations. I have to be sharp, and I just can't stay up night after night after night all night. So I'm really hoping that they address this problem. That being said, overall, it was a phenomenal tournament with many storylines, a lot of drama, some tears shed over Serena retiring, good memories, and the youth movement, which is really exciting.
Yeah, agreed. It's really interesting as well because you're saying about staying up, and well, I was one of those crazy people, and like I said, I've only got one little one and still very young, so I managed to get away with it kind of. But I've definitely been through the zombie stage. I've pushed past it now, so I'm feeling a little bit better. But
Good.
yeah, those are dark times, but exciting times as well,
Yes.
for sure. It's the things we do for tennis, as we were saying,
Yes.
off air as well. But yeah, I mean, incredible tournament in the end. And I was saying as well to you before we started that on the women's side, last year, of course, we had Raducanu and Fernandez, which was so random. No one expected it. No one would have picked it. Not that I know of. Maybe there was someone out there that has a lot of money and
Yeah.
is living off it now. But on the men's side, it was like the most obvious final you could ever have, right? Djokovic versus Medvedev, which is the two top seeds, and everyone expecting that to happen. And you're like, oh, okay, great, that's happening. This year it was okay. Jaber's not the second best player in the world, but really, given her form this year, she probably should be. Of course, no
Mhm.
ranking points at Wimbledon, so she would have been. And so her and
Mhm.
Swiatek in the final wasn't like a massive surprise, and it was again like two top players, probably the two best players this year on the women's
Mhm.
side. And on the men's side, and Alcaraz, some people might say it's not a surprise, but I think people were probably more surprised that he was there than not. Although I know you picked him as your winner, so you'll tell me that you weren't, of course. But and then Casper Ruud, who I don't think anyone really picked him to make the final. So a little bit more random on that side. And it was good. It was great to see like something a bit more different as well. Everyone always talks about the women's side being so random, but actually this time it was the men's, and it was good to see that a little bit of difference, I think, as well, and a bit of a flip. But I guess we can start off with the men's then, and that's the most recent final that's finished as well, and Alcaraz. And there's so many stats that everyone's throwing around, but before you get into that, I mean, first I want to ask you because you predicted Alcaraz. I mean, why did you predict him in the first place? What made you think Alcaraz is going to win it?
I know, first of all, that New York is such a grind. It's best of five. Just the city itself tends to wear you down. It's a lot of noise, both during the match and outside the match, just the noise of the city, the lights, um, even the air is can kind of the pollution in the air, it can kind of beat you down. And him being so fresh at 19 years old, I just thought that if he got into a situation like he did, where he was having to play a lot of five-set matches, that he would be able to weather it. He's not just fresh in terms of a young age, he just hasn't been in this grind, this traveling circus of the ATP Tour for that many years, and so he's still, like, super excited every time he takes the court. It's almost like a young doctor who hasn't faced the burnout of illness and all the terrible things that doctors have to confront on a daily basis. He's fresh, So I thought that was a contributing factor. But the biggest thing to me, from just sort of a tactical or X's and O's standpoint, is the way that he attacks his net game, the front part of the court. It's unlike anybody really in the sport right now, with the exception of maybe a straight serve and volleyer like Cressy. And that is sort of a preview. The way he approaches the front part of the court is a preview, I think, of the next trend in tennis.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess feeding into your point about, I thought that was a really good analogy about the doctor who's kind of just fresh, and fresh and junior doctor and doesn't have to worry, doesn't have that kind of, experience of getting ill whilst on shifts. And they're very bright eyed and very eager to get things done straight away. And I feel like Alcaraz has that kind of buzzing energy about him. And that's why, look, I mean, I still think it's surprising that he played so much tennis and still managed to win. Of course, I think he spent I've got the stat here actually, 23 hours and 39 minutes on court. So that's more than any other player in major history. So as in who's gone on to win a major. So that's obviously a very, very impressive stat, considering he'd also played, the 3 5-setters before the final, which spanned over like 13 hours, saved a match point against Sinner as well. And so there was a lot going on. And I think more impressive than just physically was the mental sharpness that he showed, and also the mental strength, I think, from the word go in the final, which, I don't know if you get the same feeling, but I feel like in every final that someone plays where it's their first, they always have some sort of nerves, and sometimes it takes a player a set to get kind of into it and happy and more comfortable with the occasion and the kind of grandeur of being on that specific court against across the net. For example, Ruud played Nadal earlier in the year. That was kind of overwhelming, I felt, for him for about a set and a half. But for Alcaraz, it was like, no, I'm okay. It's like, just pick up from where I left off. And it was really refreshing to see, because you always, for me anyway, I always see jitters. I was talking about it in my preview, and I was saying, okay, well, Ruud might not have as many jitters because he's already played a Grand Slam final. And he's the underdog as well, so he probably has that as a mental advantage. Whereas Alcaraz was already talking about being nervous after his semi-final win, and I was thinking, yeah, okay, that's not a bad thing, but he acknowledges it, which means he's probably going to feel it. And if he did feel it, he didn't show it anyway, for me, because I think the first 4 games there were break point opportunities for each player, and Alcaraz didn't get broken. He's the one that ended up getting the break, and I was just thinking to myself, he's coming out clutch in moments that most people, they don't have kind of that ice cold in their veins to just say, it's my first Grand Slam final and I'm just going to treat it like any other match, or a match that I'm going to go on to win, but I'm not going to get overawed by the occasion. And that to me was very strange to witness, but also incredibly eye-opening as well, as to maybe getting a window into his mentality. I don't know what you thought about that. Did you find the same thing as well as watching it?
Yeah, I think he was definitely more confident than Ruud and calmer. And the way that you temper your anxiety, and this is in life, it can be it can be a phobia that you have, or nerves about public speaking. The way in psychology that you fix that or cure it is to gradually expose yourself to it. So the fact that he played all those hours going into the final, he'd already been in these clutch situations or these tight situations in front of the crowd on that court. So he basically gave himself graduated exposure to the circumstances. Therefore, when the final rolled around, it just felt like the matches that he'd been playing for the 2 weeks prior. So, I think the best way to get rid of your nerves is to expose yourself to a situation, and Alcaraz had plenty of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think for Alcaraz, it was just for him, as you say, he wasn't overawed at all, and he just dealt with his nerves. And I like the point that you made about that. It was almost like a gradual,
Mhm.
experience for him over a number of rounds, and then when he got to the final, it just wasn't as big a step, as kind of big a jump up to expose himself to, I guess, the occasion, because he'd already been there, already had saved a match point against Sinner. A lot of people thought he'd actually lose that as well. And then against Cilic with 5-setter against the former US Open champion, and TFO was just, a crazy match as well, where he got pushed and pushed. So, he went into it with the 0-4 tiebreak record going into the final as well. And then in the tiebreak, he managed to win against Ruud, which is just, flip the script. Everything just seemed to be falling into place. And I think, interestingly, at the end, he'd only won 5 more points than Ruud in the match, which shows that he he actually managed his games a lot better in a way, which was great to see. And he conserved his energies at times, which we always attribute Alcaraz to being full of energy, chasing out every single ball. But there were a couple of points where he kind of knew, okay, I'm 40 love down in the return game. Ruud's got a short ball to attack. I'm not going to completely, go from one side of the court to the other, completely, tire myself out when I need to serve probably in about a minute's time. So I'll let that one go. I think he'd obviously played a lot of tennis, so he would have felt it a little bit. I know they asked him after, and he said, "Oh, I'm a little bit tired." And I thought, "I really only a little bit." I was like, "Fair play." I mean, were you when he came up against Sinner and TFO? Were you thinking, "Oh, actually, he might be in danger," or were you still pretty confident with your prediction, thinking that actually he's going to maneuver his way through these pretty comfortably, or not just comfortably, but get through them? Because you're pretty confident in his ability and had seen him. I know you saw his first round match as well, so would have had a little bit to go upon because you were there live. But did you see him progressing well through the tournament? Thought actually he's looking very good and he's looking on course to win it.
Yes, he in that first round match against Sebastian Baez, he actually gave up a set, and I wasn't worried at all, and I kind of had the inkling that if he can remain healthy, and that's a big if, because every time you're on the court in a grinding match, there's the chance that you'll get injured, and especially the way he plays all out. And then I saw him against Cilic, and I knew that okay, he's starting to find his range. He's starting to understand, as you said, when he needs to kind of pull back. Although that is a slippery slope. I don't necessarily advocate for playing like that, but you're right. In this tournament, he managed it to perfection. There are some percentages that say in men's tennis, if the server wins the first point of the game, then he's going to go on to hold serve the vast majority of the time, something like 70 to 80% of the time. If he wins the first 2 points, then it goes up from there. First 3 points, it's up into the 90s. So you can, if you know those stats and those percentages, you can sort of give yourself breaks. I don't know if he does, but I think you're spot on with that he managed his energy very well.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, in terms of his accomplishment, I mean, there's all these facts and figures being thrown around, and the youngest number one in ATP history. I know he's got. Someone mentioned to me that but his points are quite low, and I was like, doesn't matter. He's still number one, I guess. The ranking's the ranking. Youngest Grand Slam men's champion since Nadal, of course, and youngest US Open men's champion since Pete Sampras. So there's loads of other stats. I won't go through all of them and bore everyone at home, but I mean, it's just incredible to think about, especially given, I know he's won Miami, Madrid, and Barcelona this year, so he's won titles, but the loss to Sinner and Wimbledon, after that, people thinking, okay, well, maybe he's not quite ready to win a slam. Maybe he's not quite ready to make the next step. And I was saying, you know what, at the start of the year, I said, I don't think he'll win one this year, but if he does, most likely it might be the US Open because of the way it plays. But I wasn't convinced. I said, I think it'll be next year. And he proved me wrong. I think he proved a lot of people wrong. And I think it was more the mental aspect than the physical and skill. Everyone knows the skill that he possesses, and I guess the trials that he's come up against say a Sinner was even more impressive than maybe the final win or the semi-final win, because I feel like playing against Sinner after losing 2 matches in a row to him on 2 different surfaces was a battle in itself, and then obviously saving a match point. But I don't know if you watched that match. Were you were you impressed with how he handled it in the end? Because that was obviously pretty touch and go, but I thought he did really well to adjust, right, and strategically more than anything. In the past, he was getting completely dominated in the backhand to backhand rallies, but he adjusted how he dealt with those. Made sure that he didn't give Sinner as much angle, tried to go to the forehand, into it as much as possible, go down the line early. He was one to go line first. It was just one of the tactics that he utilized. But I thought I was really, really impressed with the way that he managed to adapt on the big stage and also fight his way through it.
Yeah, I think in the center match, he may have discovered something that a lot of the scouts on the ATP tour know, which is in certain situations, the forehand of your opponent can actually be more error prone, even though it's the stronger shot, and on the surface you want to stay away from the forehand. But when things get tight, statistically, you can often get more errors off of that wing. But just, going away from the baseline for a second, because I just wrote an article on this. It reminds me of a clinic that I took because I'm an amateur player, and I got an opportunity to take a clinic with one of the directors of player development at USTA, and it was a singles clinic, and it was about approaching the net. So the guy had like four of us, and he said, I want you to take this orange cone, and he gave each of us an orange cone, and he said, I want you to place the orange cone on the court where the ball would bounce, that you would consider that an approach shot to approach and come in the net. And I consider myself a pretty aggressive player, so I put my orange cone kind of couple feet behind the service line. So if the ball bounces a couple feet behind the service line, I'm going to hit the ball as an approach and come into the net. Now, another girl who's a very counterpuncher style, defensive type retriever player, very good player, better than me, she placed her cone a couple feet in front of the net. So in other words, she's not going to leave the baseline unless she gets a super, super short ball. Then she'll come in and try to finish the point. What we're seeing with Alcaraz is actually his orange cone may be right at the baseline, because he is approaching on balls that in this sport people don't normally approach on. And he's the classic pattern against a player like Ruud, who's a right-handed player with a good forehand and a weaker backhand, is to approach on a short ball down the line to the backhand, then come in and finish at the net to the open court. What Alcaraz was doing in this match was actually not approaching down the line, but approaching cross court with either his inside out forehand or his backhand, approaching all the way cross court to Ruud's backhand, and then rushing the net diagonally with his speed and finishing in the open court. And that's just like, not a lot of players do that. So I think it's going to usher in a new trend and a new way to look at net play and approaches. And I just wrote this article, and he's just, if you could watch him the next time you have the opportunity to watch Alcaraz play, watch when he decides to come into the net. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, agreed. I covered his last 3 or 4 matches, like from start to finish, and I 100% agree with you because some of the approaches you just think, oh, that might be crazy, but he's got the speed to make up the ground transition quick enough, and then his split step and his movement towards the net is so good for the most part, and he's got such soft hands, great touch. A lot of the volleys that he does hit are almost like ankle height, so they are tough volleys, but he makes them look easy a lot of the time, and that's because his hands are so good. So I guess he's willing to there's a trade-off, and he's willing to say, okay, I'd rather come to the net and have to hit a hard volley than say I'm just going to sit on the back of the baseline and be comfortable and then hit another groundy, basically. He's saying, oh, no, I'm going to come forward because I want to try and shorten the point. I want to be aggressive, and he's willing to take that risk. I guess with other players, they might not be able to execute that as well, even if they're as quick, because you need to have like the complete package. And that's incredible to see. And it's a really good point about the backhand. cross as well. The fact that he was going backhand cross or into that forehand into Ruud's backhand and approaching. And obviously, everybody who knows Pythagoras' theorem will know that that's the longest distance to travel, right? Diagonally into the net. So the fact that he was managing to do it and do it successfully was incredible to see. And I agree 100% that his style and the more that he continues to thrive and succeed will mean we will see more players wanting to come to the net. And I feel like that's only a good thing, really, because I do enjoy the baseline rallies for sure. And I think obviously that trend has come about because one, the courts have got a bit slower, and also Nadal and Djokovic have been so dominant. I know Federer, of course, as well, but in the last few years he hasn't been as much. So with Nadal and Nadal and Djokovic, even they're so strong from the baseline. Arguably the two best baseliners ever. That a lot of people want to stick to the baseline, and we saw a rally with Ruud and Berrettini, which was 55 shots, I think it was, which was like
I'm mad at Berrettini for that. At his height, I mean, and he actually does have very good hands.
He does, yeah.
But that's the great thing about Alcaraz. He can also do a punishing baseline rally as well.
Yeah.
So you never know what he's going to do, and it's really interesting.
I feel like, and I know I don't want to get ahead of myself, and I'm not going to say that he's going to be on the level of the GOATs. I'm not going to say that because I don't think he will be, but who knows? We'll see. But I think realistically, Nadal and Djokovic and Federer, you just put them in their own kind of bracket and you just put them to one side and just see how Alcaraz gets on. But in terms of like completeness of game, he's probably got one of the most complete games I've seen of a 19-year-old. Just because of the diversity he's got. There's definitely like aspects of his game that can be improved for sure. But generally, if you look at the skeleton of his game, like he can do a bit of everything, as you said. He can rally from the baseline, and he can punish you with a forehand, the backhand. Defensively there are some like things that can be ironed out still, but all in all, is a pretty solid weapon. Unless he's playing against someone with an elite backhand, really, it doesn't get exposed at all. The backhand slice is like a work in progress, but again, it's serviceable. His hands at the net are great. Transitions beautifully, great defense, and like an ability to move around the court. His serve, I mean, he hit 14 aces against Ruud, so he's improving that, hitting his spots better, bulking it up. So it just seems like there's not, and his return of serve, sorry, I forgot to mention, is obviously quite natural to him as well. So I don't know, in your experience as well, have you seen many other 19-year-olds who have this kind of, I guess, such a well-rounded game even at this age?
No, I haven't seen anything like this. I do think he served very well against Ruud, and the aces were probably a big reason why he won and won in 4 sets. I think the serve is an area where he needs more free points. He needs more aces, and he needs more unreturned serves, and he needs more serves that will elicit a garbage ball that he can then put away with the next shot. Otherwise, he is going to continue to play these marathon matches, and that could impact his health, stamina, well-being, the whole thing. So, Dominic Thiem is a cautionary tale, the amount of tennis that guy played. Carlitos is managing his schedule much more parsimoniously, if that's the proper use of that word, or judiciously. He's holding back on playing like this plethora of tournaments like Thiem did. However, if every tournament you enter, you're playing marathon matches, then you're still going to be a lot of time, a lot of miles on the tires. So he's going to have to improve his serve to have the staying power. But Nadal did that, so it's certainly possible. The fact that he is young means that his brain and his mentality are more malleable and will be more accepting of the change. So I think they'll get on that. And yeah, I mean, he's unique. And one of my kids walked into the room while I was watching the final last night and doesn't watch much tennis at all, wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between Nadal and Federer. And she said, wow, that one guy with the dark hair, his ball goes so fast when he hits it. That was her sort of childlike impression. And that's, what she's seeing is the power and the art that he has.
Yeah, children have great insight because they see things that we don't,
Yeah.
we just take for granted, and that's a really good point. Like he does, he hits such a, he does, he the acceleration through his ground strokes are just incredible at times, and sometimes it is a bit wild, and he overcooks it, and it looks a bit, embarrassing. You might say, oh, that's a bit embarrassing. He's gone like 4 meters behind the baseline, but majority of the time, he is hitting through the court with a lot of pace, and Daughter made a very good point for sure, and I think especially given that Rude as well has a pretty solid forehand himself. It was impressive to see. I guess going on to Rude, I mean, how impressive was his final run? I definitely didn't have him making the final, and I think he's improved so much on the hard courts. Obviously, I know he made the final in Miami, but he hasn't really had incredible results on the hard courts that make you think, yeah, he can win a slam on a hard court. A lot of people thinking he was going to be clay court specialist and maybe win a French Open someday. But no, I don't think anyone was thinking, oh yeah, this guy's going to win the US Open or have a chance to win the US Open this year. So the way that I think he played in a tournament, and I think served, and I feel like his serve 1+ plays are potentially like top 5 on tour. Just the way that he's able to hit spots, and then most of the time the next ball is a forehand, and it's a very good forehand, attacking, proactive forehand that gets him on the front foot straight away. His returning's improved, like his return position was. I know in the final it was very deep, and I wasn't a massive fan of that. But I know against, for example, Berrettini and Khachanov, he actually wasn't super far back. He'd moved up, not to the baseline, but like 2-3 meters behind it, and he's returning better, rushing the opponents. And I just feel like there's been big improvements. The backhand is another one. I mean, the backhand against Nadal, you watch the final and there's air balls going backhand cross to Nadal's forehand. Whereas we watched against Alcaraz, he hit a few backhand winners. At one point, he hit more backhand winners than Alcaraz, and was highlighted by, I think there was a winner which was behind the second serve, and he stepped in on the return and hit the backhand down the line for a win. And he was thinking, okay, all right, okay. I don't remember Rude ever doing that in the past. So he's, in my opinion, anyway, made massive leaps and bounds. What's your read on it?
I think that the book that a lot of people had on him was fast court, not as good, slow court, excellent. And it's true that he did not do well at Wimbledon this year, but it didn't really hurt him because there were no points awarded to anyone. But he did get to the final of Miami, which is a hard court, lost to Alcaraz there. He's just an all around good, solid player. That said, I think he could improve his work in the front court. Um, and yeah, the backhand was good, and I also think that his improved backhand helped him in the match against Berrettini. But yeah, he deserves to be the number 2 player in the world, and he's just consistent. I mean, the guy just doesn't make a lot of errors, and that's going to take him far.
Yeah, agreed. Just very consistent game, and I guess I was going to say it's a little bit like Cam Norris, but not quite. That makes sense. But in the way that consistency's there for Casper Ruud, but he's, as you said, definitely deserving of the number 2 ranking currently, and I'm interested to see how he gets on next year. Of course, there's still some tennis to be played this year as well, but just to see whether he's able to kick on, considering that he made 2 slam finals this year. So it's like, okay, well, the next step is, can he win a slam? I think he will win a slam. I don't know whether it'll be next year, but I think it will be at some point. So I'm just interested to see whether he's able to kick on. And I know he said after that, the key to winning a Grand Slam for him is to not play anyone Spanish in the final. So I think he's not looking forward to seeing any Spanish flags anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, great tournament for him. And the Berrettini win was, as you mentioned, was a really impressive victory. I thought played incredibly well for the first 2 sets, ran away with it. I think he actually blew Berrettini off the court for the first 2 sets. Berrettini didn't know what hit him. And then by the time he recovered, it was too late. And he ended up losing in straight sets. So that was really impressive from Ruud, and good to see him, I think, implementing some of the changes that we've seen in the last few months. In terms of other players, I mean, of course, we have to talk about Rafa, and you were there for the TFO match. I mean, I'll let you talk about that. I mean, what was your read on the whole match? Was it TFO playing extremely well? I mean, he had a fantastic tournament, of course, and Rafa not playing as well, coinciding at the same time, or was it just, you know what, TFO was too good on the day and Rafa played maybe his average level, but it wasn't a massive dip from what we, I guess, are used to seeing?
I think Tiafo served better against Rafa in that match. Maybe served as good as I've ever seen him serve. He was clocking in at close to 140 on several of his serves, and he was hitting his spots. Tiafo did not do that against Alcaraz. His speeds were down a little bit. Still great, but down a little bit, and he wasn't hitting his spots as much. Rafa, I said before, I check my notes here, there were 4 things working against him. He has the injury, to the ab, and he had to change his service motion going into the tournament because of that. So he did not serve well. He has the wife who is pregnant and reportedly is having some minor complications, but whatever it may be, when you're in that situation, your thoughts are going to be, with your family. Um, it struggled with return, obviously, because I mentioned Tiafo was serving unbelievably well. But then here was the big one. We all go through these times in our life where it's like, I'm getting older. And it doesn't matter if you're 16 years old and you realize that you're not 12 anymore, or if you're 30 and you realize that you're not 19 anymore. And it can affect, your belief. And there was a Rafa quote after the match in which he said, to be able to play elite out here, I'm paraphrasing, you need the reflexes of youth. And I don't have that right now. So while I do believe that that's not the only thing that you need, like youth and reflexes to be able to win, and that Rafa can win without youth because he's so smart and he's got all this match experience and he's still young enough to be an elite athlete. I disagree with him on that point, but that's not the point. The point is, does he believe? And if the age thing is bothering him right now for whatever reason, whether it's life changes because he's about to be a father, or these injuries that are dogging him, for whatever reason, age is a thing in his mind right now. And if that affects his belief on the court, then that's going to have an impact.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's the mental aspect, right, which we always attribute Djokovic and Nadal to being so mentally tough and strong, and they'll just go through anything and they can overcome anything. But it's a really good point you made about, I guess, reading between the lines a little bit, that he talked about becoming a father and maybe the aches and pains and these younger players coming through. I think actually when he played Alcaraz in Rome and he lost, afterwards he was saying, Alcaraz is basically, he's going to take over soon. He was saying, he's going to take over soon. He's young, and he has mentioned it a few times actually. Now that you mention it, so I think it definitely is something playing on his mind. Whether it's going to be, a massive thing that ends up potentially hampering him going forward, I don't know. But I do feel like he's the type of player that if it does get to the stage where he's really unhappy mentally with where he's at in terms of his game, then he will just say, you know what, I'm going to retire,
Yeah.
because I don't feel like he wants to be playing on court if he's not able to compete the way he wants to compete. So he did put out a post saying, "I'll see you next year." So I don't know what that means,
Yeah.
but
And
that means
then
he's
that
wanting
being
to play.
said, I get alerts on my phone whenever Rafa tweets, and shortly after the match, I mean, this is like minutes after the match, I get on my phone, an alert for Rafa Nadal has tweeted, "Congratulations to Carlos." So he was obviously watching and just ready to hit send on that tweet. But then this morning I wake up and I see Rafa is back on court at his academy, working out, working hard. So he's obviously not ready to retire yet. And you can just see like him sitting there itching to get back to form and get better again. So I don't think I doubt he'll retire in 2023.
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound like it considering he was saying, see you next year in New York. So that to me means that he's at least
Mhm.
planning to play the US Open next year. So it's crazy. I mean, it's great news, but I just, as someone who's a bit of a Rafa fan, I was thinking, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe next year's last year or mid next year, whatever. But no, he's got no plans to retire anytime soon by the looks of it. And yeah, I'm supposed to be watching him at the Laver Cup and hopefully he plays. So yeah, stay fit, Rafa, so I can see you, please. So that would be good to watch.
Yes.
But yeah, TFO. I mean, we can talk about TFO because as an American, you must be really proud of how well he played, just generally in the whole tournament. But I was watching him thinking, look, if he can carry on playing like this consistently, he is like a top 10 player because the way he was hitting his spots on his serve. And I always say to people on my videos that in my eyes, I think there's 5 elite servers on tour that consistently, in my eyes, are the best servers on tour. And that's Isner Opelka, Hakac, Berrettini, and Kyrgios. Those are my 5 that I think, those are the 5 best servers. And I think TFO was at that level throughout the tournament. That's how good I think he was serving.
Mhm.
And especially against Rafa, as you mentioned, he was close to 140 miles per hour, hitting his spots incredibly, especially down the tee. I mean, if you serve that quickly down the tee, it's so hard as a returner, especially he's painting the lines literally down the tee to get it back into play, even for someone as good at returning as Rafa. So I thought he served incredibly well, and the way that he was able to boss the points from the back of the court in that match as well, with his very compact and kind of short backswing forehand, which a lot of people think is technically weird or like it's how do you generate power? Sorry, but his timing is so good. Like his
Mhm.
timing is so good of the forehand, and the backhand as well is very solid itself. So he's able to generate power from the back of the court easily, easy power. He likes to come forward as well. He's happy to come forward and volley at the net. Has the tricks, has the angles that he's able to utilize, and he's returning as well, aggressive coming forward, similar to Kyrgios. But I almost feel like his returning is better than the Kyrgios from what I saw in the US Open anyway, and the way that he was able to step in and actually punish people behind the return. So I was really impressed with him, and I have seen him in the past, but I haven't seen a lot of him because he never really manages to go that deep in a lot of the Grand Slams or a lot of even the Masters tournaments at times. So for me, it was pretty eye-opening to see, okay, this is the type of talent he's got. At 24 years of age, he's still pretty young. I know he was really gutted to lose the Alcaraz match. And,
Yeah.
he was saying, I wanted to win it. And I feel like that mentality to say, you know what, I'm going to come back and win this is really, really good for him going forward and puts him in great stead. What was your read on TFO? Were you impressed or were you not surprised about how well he did in the end?
I think with the new coach, and when I say new, he's been working with him for a couple of years now, Wayne Ferreira. And I read a really interesting anecdote that Ferreira had really sought to limit Tiafoe's time on his phone. Like he makes him go for a run and he's not allowed to bring his phone to listen to music. And it was really about like patience and not looking to pull the trigger in points and playing more defense and more discipline and that kind of thing, because you're right, he has the serve. But the other thing is second serve. And I know that this is something that he's been working on. I'll tell you a quick story. A couple years ago, I was just looking to play a casual match with a friend here in Connecticut where I live. I live about an hour from New York City. This is like north in Connecticut, away from New York City, in a town called Trumbull. So it was the day before Thanksgiving, the morning, and I stumbled in. I got a million things to do. It's like 6, 7 a.m. in the morning. I'm the only one at the tennis facility. I take the court and I'm waiting for my opponent. Don't have any makeup on. Like I'm really and who walks on the court? Francis Tiafoe, fresh from the Davis Cup. And he I'm on his assigned court apparently. And that guy was so nice. My first word to him was like, seriously? what are you doing here? And he was there to work with James Blake's former coach. Blake had hooked him up, and they were there specifically to work on second serve. And I moved over to the next court, and while I played my match, I watched what he was working on, and he was working specifically on different spins, kick, and different placements for the second serve, because that's been a bugaboo for him. And while it's shown improvement, I think it could even improve even more. But my point of the story is this is a super nice guy, super popular. Everybody on tour loves him. After his workout at that club, he signed autographs for kids, took pictures, the whole 9 yards. So, as an American and an American tennis player, this guy could bring a lot to the sport, and he's still very young.
Yeah, he is so young, and he seems like a really, really nice guy. And of course, you have the experience. That's a really cool story, actually. I'm glad he shared it because TFO, he seems like the Ons Jabeur of the men's side of the ATP tour for sure, where everyone just loves him. Everyone's like, oh, I don't have a bad word to say about him because he's just so bubbly, great character. And he just seems like he really enjoys it. He just loves it. He just enjoys playing tennis and with a smile on his face all the time. And that's great to see. It really is. And I really wish and hope that he continues to improve and actually keeps going deep in these tournaments, because I feel like his style is very exciting, similar to Alcaraz in terms of the way that they play, slightly different but exciting nonetheless, and obviously he uses the crowd as well to his advantage, like a Kyrgios, which is really cool to see. Were you quickly actually as we're talking about Americans? Are you a little bit disappointed with some of the Americans on the men's side? I mean, Taylor Fritz, I guess, would have been someone that I'm assuming you would have expected to go a bit deeper.
Yeah.
But a Korda, Isner. I mean, I know Apelka didn't play in the end, but Isner and Nakashima. I mean, there's obviously the Americans had a lot of good players. Brooksby, that were on the men's side, but maybe didn't go as far as expected. I mean, was that how you saw it as well, or was it just the draw wasn't particularly kind to them in the end?
I picked Fritz to go to the Final Four.
Wow.
So yes, I was a little bit disappointed, but Tiafo makes up for it. Um, Fritz just he got into an emotional match with a kid that he knew growing up, Brandon Holt, Tracy Austin's son, and just wasn't prepared for the match emotionally, mentally, and got surprised. I still think if he hadn't drawn his good childhood buddy in the first round, that Fritz may have made a really deep run. So, these are human beings. Anything can happen in one tournament. I'm still really bullish on American men's tennis.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time until they start really breaking through. So it's going to be interesting to see which players do and which players don't, because a lot of people might have thought, say, someone like a Seb Corda might have already broken through because of the way that he plays and like kind of the style, but obviously hasn't quite yet. But it's still a lot of time for so many of them, which is great to see. On some of the other players, I mean, Alcaraz has won his first Grand Slam title before, say, Tsitsipas or Zverev, and I'm assuming they're going to be pretty disappointed with that. But Tsitsipas, I mean, what was your view in his tournament? Because a lot of people had him going pretty deep, given the what his draw looked like. A lot of people also, I actually had some people saying to me he's going to win it, or at least make the final, because they are that confident about the way he was going to play, and I guess the draw looked pretty good for him. Were you disappointed, or maybe a little bit surprised at how he ended up going out in the end?
I did not pick him for the Final Four of this tournament because of the one-handed backhand and the surface of the US Open court. They have quickened it over the course of the last 2 years. So it used to be this really slow hard court, and that's one of the reasons that Rafa was able to grab the title a couple of times in recent years. But they've quickened it. And if you have a one-handed backhand on a fast court, like I do, I understand that conundrum and problem all too well. It's going to be your hardest surface, and I think that's one of the reasons that Tsitsipas has emerged as a guy who is playing really well on clay because he has time to load that stroke up. But I know that his camp is extremely frustrated with what happened, and that it's back to the drawing board, and he's going to try even harder and double down and work even harder. So he's not going away, and I definitely think he's going to win a Grand Slam probably within the next 2 years, I'll say.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, it was crazy the way he lost as well, because he got bageled and breadsticks in the first 2 sets. He was like, "What is going on?" It was crazy. But the point you made about the courts being quicker is interesting, because I 100% agree with you, actually, that obviously when he has more time, it's obviously better for him on the backhand side, with the swing, and also on the forehand as well. Just he's able to defend better on the forehand side as well. His serve's big enough that he'll win and get 3 points even on the slower surfaces. But I don't know if you know, you might not know the answer to this, but the last 2 years at the Australian Open, obviously, he's made the semi-finals, right? And in my eyes, Australian Open is a quicker hard court than the US Open. So I find it really strange that at the US Open, his results have been terrible. I think he's only ever made the third round at the US Open, if I'm not mistaken, or fourth round maximum. Whereas at the Australian Open, his results have been pretty good. And I think he played, I want to say Djokovic, no, Medvedev this year. And he actually played pretty well against me. I think he lost in 4 sets in the end. But I mean, looking at that, it makes me think, why is that the case? Why at the Australian Open, when it's a little bit quicker, does he have more success? And then you'd expect him to do slightly better at the US Open, because I know it's quicker, but generally it's quicker, but it's still not as quick as the Australian Open. I could be wrong. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any
Yes,
thoughts?
it's quicker. The Australian Open surface is quicker than the US Open, even with the US Open being speeded up. That's a really good point. My guess would be, I tend to look at these things from not just like concrete, but also a humanistic or
Hmm.
emotional point of view. I think fatigue. To start the
Yeah.
season, you've gone in with a month off, and at the end of the season, you're tired, and they push him. The Tsitsipas team, he plays a lot of tournaments. So after the North American hard court run up to the U.S. Open, he may have just and the whole year of tennis in general, he may have just been tired,
Yeah.
mentally, physically.
No, agreed. Yeah, definitely could be that, and it might also be the fact that in Australia they have a pretty large cohort of Greek people, a large
Hmm.
population of Greek people as well. So, wonder whether that plays into a little bit as well, for sure. And then on the actually, before we go on to women's side, is there anything on the men's side you want to talk about?
No, I think we got it with Alcaraz. I think we covered it. He's
Hmm.
super exciting.
Yeah, I'm also going to the ATP Tour Finals. I'm hoping I see him on the day that I'm going as well. That'll be good to
Oh,
see. But
great.
yeah,
Fun.
yeah, it will be fun. It's a day trip as well, because obviously I live in the UK, so just literally flight out, go there for the day, and then fly back in the evening. So should be good in Italy. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. So on the women's side, of course, Iga Swiatek won third Grand Slam, first Grand Slam that isn't on a clay court, which is really impressive, especially given that before the tournament she was talking about the balls and was like, the balls are just too light. They don't have. I want the balls with the extra duty balls or the extra felt like the men. Understandable. Like, I don't understand why that's the case, but I guess it's because in the past they thought that the women were a little bit more underpowered than the men, so they thought, okay, let's give them balls that's, I guess can accelerate through the court quicker. But nowadays, I mean, the girls hit the ball so hard. I don't think they
Hmm.
necessarily need them. But either
There
way,
are there are women on tour that hit harder on average and
yeah,
on one-offs than men on
yeah.
tour. So you might as well just have the same balls.
Yeah, there was that stat, wasn't there? I think from the French Open this year, I think it was, where they were saying Swiatek's forehand speed was the same average speed as Rafa's, which I guess it can be a little bit misleading, because obviously Rafa hits a lot of topspin, a lot of coverage, but
Mhm.
still, like,
She
he
has
hits
a
a heavy
lot of
ball.
topspin too.
She does. She does. Yeah, that's true as well. So yeah, so that's incredibly impressive. So I can see her point. I know Ash Barty's coach made the point when she was still playing, that they thought she'd never win the US Open because of the balls, which is a very, very strange thing to say. Just completely cut out and say, no, we're never going to win it. I'm never going to win it because of the balls.
Right,
But
right.
anyway, Swiatek adapted really, really well to the balls and the courts. and ended up winning in the end against Ons Jabeur in the final in straight sets. And she played some really good tennis, especially given that she was, I think, 4-2 down against Sabalenka in the final set, that semi-final, recovered well. Could say Sabalenka maybe checked a little bit. She played some really good tennis as well herself, and we'll touch upon her in a second. But, I mean, how impressed were you by Swiatek? And I don't necessarily think she played her best tennis, but still managed to win it, which to me is even more impressive than anything, because just shows her quality and class that she's able to maneuver her way through 2 weeks of very competitive tennis and in the end come out victorious.
That did seem to be the take throughout the tournament, that Iga was not playing her best tennis. It's all relative because we're so used to Iga just running through these draws of these tournaments where she's bageling people and breadsticking people. It's funny how we now hold her to that standard, because if, let's just say, she were an unknown and she had come into this tournament, I don't think people would be saying that her level was not good. I think people would be looking at her and going, wow, who is this person that hits this heavy ball and finds a way to win? And yes, she does bagel and breadstick some sets, So I thought her level was good. And I thought that she managed the mental game, the tight points. I thought she managed that brilliantly. And Iga is, in my view, a tempo player, and that's why it's really impressive when she plays a disruptor like Jabeur and handles it really well as she did. So that just proves that she can beat a tempo player, she can beat a power player, she can beat a finesse player, and she can beat a disruptor. It's really impressive.
Yeah, she's got a style that's able to, as you say, it's a style that's able to compete and most of the time beat those any type of style, which is what you want as a top player. And I guess consolidating her position as world number one in the world. And I'm interested to see now going forward how she gets on in the Grand Slams next year. I feel like this is a really big kind of just stepping stone, because before it was okay, well, she's winning Grand Slam titles, but at the French, and she's able to win master tournaments in the hard courts. And okay, Wimbledon maybe not her best surface on grass, but that's a work in progress. But now that she's won the US, I feel like it's opened the floodgates, and she now believes. Okay, I know she said afterwards that basically there is no limit to what she can achieve, and I feel like she's now very much confident in her own ability to say, you know what, I feel like I can dominate. So let's see how she gets on. But I feel like the rest of the women are looking at it thinking, oh no, this is probably the worst possible thing that could have happened at the US Open for the rest of the field, because they're thinking now she's really going to gain a lot of confidence from that win for sure. And Ons Jabeur had a great run as well, though. You mentioned Ons Jabeur. I mean, I didn't think she was going to make the final. Just because I feel like her game is more suited to, ironically, the grass and clay, which makes almost no sense because they're complete extremes. The grass obviously quicker surface, low bouncing, clay slow and high bouncing. But I just feel because the way she slices and dices the drop shots, then work on the clay, and she has a lot more time. And just the way that she plays is there's so many different ways she can play. And she just seems to be more comfortable moving and playing on those surfaces. But the way that she played at the US Open, I thought I was really impressed by. And it's just a shame that, like Casper Ruud, she's made 2 Grand Slam finals this year, but has come out second best in both. So that will hurt her, and she's not as young as Casper Ruud as well. And I think she would probably, at the end of this year, look back to the Wimbledon final and think, I played against Rybakina, who was playing some really good tennis, but was a big underdog, wasn't expected to win, went to 3 sets, had opportunities, didn't take it. Against Swiatek, she probably won't feel as bad because Swiatek, well, number one, and she played extremely well. So, I mean, were you surprised? Who did you pick actually for the women's? And were you surprised about Ons Jabeur and how well she played throughout the
I,
tournament?
I picked Pagula to win the
Oh,
tournament.
so did I. Wow, snap. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
both
and
wrong.
so she had a great run.
She did.
So
I
that
think
was
it's because I
actually.
picked Swiatek to get knocked out earlier, so
So
that she
did
wouldn't have to
I.
play her. Yeah.
So did I. I It's great that Ons has emerged as an all-surface player. A little bit of bad luck. She had a deep run at Wimbledon where she got no points because of the Russian ban, and she low-key lost, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the first round of the French
She did, yeah.
Open.
After a great clay court swing, yeah.
Yes, after a great clay court season. So bad luck. Too bad she couldn't have flipped Roland Garros and Wimbledon results. But she's proving she can play on any surface. And people talk about the slicing and dicing, the drop shots, the creativity and all that, but they overlook the fact that she's also a power player.
Yeah, she is, yeah.
She can knock the ball silly. So she's to me one of to watch. She's one of the most entertaining and
Yeah.
interesting players on the women's tour. So I wish her continued success. And I am friendly with the person that does her data analytics and scouting, which she has been using for many years.
Wow.
So, I mean, you think that there's a randomness and a spontaneity to her game, but she's actually quite wonky when it comes to the data and scouting. So, I want to see her crack the EGA code, like really figure out how you can get
Yeah.
Eva or EGA, or at least make it a closer match.
Yeah. Especially considering the head-to-head was 2-2 going to the final, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the recent results, wasn't it,
Mm-hmm.
that Iga had just managed to figure it out. But I agree, she's a power play, and in a way as well. Like against Caroline Garcia, she went hard and flat into Caroline Garcia, and Caroline Garcia didn't like it. And a lot of people thinking Caroline Garcia was going to win that match. She was the underdog almost, a lot of people's eyes. And Caroline Garcia also winning Cincinnati and playing good tennis. I think, she might go on to win the US Open. So that was a really good win. And it's interesting, the data analytics as well, that she uses it a lot. I wonder if it's more of a chaotic pattern to play. So it's a organized madness, which is comes out and with a lot of success at the end of it, which is great to see because I feel like she uses a lot of data, and I can actually see why she uses it. But her coach, I think, tends to rip his hair out a lot because I think there is some off the cuff things that she'll do in matches. I know after the Caroline Garcia win, she said, "For the first time ever, I listened to my coach completely, and I won." And I was like, yeah, he was really happy. I was really happy. So she's like, I'll see how it goes. And then the Swiatek match, her coach got so angry with her. I remember because I think she just went into spontaneous mode.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's just because she's that type of player and personality that she just wants to excite, and she has these. I feel like she's got a million thoughts running through her head about the way that she can play, and maybe finds it hard to completely nail down. But yeah, I'm really hoping she wins a slam because I feel like she's deserving of one, at least one in her career. But I think she's 28 years of age, so she's still got a bit of time, and hopefully she continues her run. But yeah, if you know the data analyst, then maybe Amy at some point you have to hook me up with an interview or something.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that she really uses it for is scouting her opponent, like understanding where that person's serve tendencies and placements are so that she knows
Their
how to
patterns.
return, against. And like, okay, if I return cross court forehand to this person's forehand, am I going to get an error a preponderance of the time, or am I going to get a short ball, or the different scenarios, really revolving around serve and return and where to serve to this person to get the errors.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense, I guess. I talked to actually Holger Rune's data analyst as well. I think he's done some with Tsitsipas, and the way that they speak and they talk about it is just so technical that I love it. I can't keep up completely. I have to be honest with you. I try my best, but it really is eye opening to hear them speak about it, and it's just so different to how I guess other people end up perceiving it or watching a match and kind of breaking it down. So it's like so intriguing. Definitely recommend people who are watching to check it out actually as well. Because we did a video on breaking down Nadal and Djokovic's serve, and it was from a completely technical standpoint. And I was like, this is so interesting to see the development over their careers and how they've changed it and tweaked it. But yeah, Jabeur, great run. And Pegula, I mean, Pegula had a good run, to be fair to her, quarterfinals. But, I think she'll be disappointed. She seems to be steady Eddie, quarterfinals, semi-finals, but just can't quite make the next step. And I think it's unfortunate she keeps on coming up against people like a Swiatek. I mean, it's tough, right, to play the eventual winner in the end, but also the number one in Swiatek. And the style obviously doesn't, I think, suit maybe Pegula as much. But she's had a great year so far. Were you impressed with the way that she was playing? Because I think up until the Swiatek match, she was playing really well, and then maybe didn't play her best tennis. And it might have just been the occasional just Swiatek was playing in a way that disrupted her even, and her rhythm.
Yeah, she's one of the most solid. She's kind of like Rude in some ways. She's one of the most solid and consistent baseliners on tour. I mean, I would love to see her approach more, but of all people, that's really not her game style. If she's gonna stay back, I'd love to see her, work on her serve and really hone and fine tune that. And I'd also love to see her engage with the crowd a little bit more. There's a few, having watched several women's matches this US Open tournament, there's a few female players that they're animated and they will show emotion, but really they'll always almost show it just to their box. So it's almost like the rest of the thousands, tens of thousands of people aren't even there. It's just between the player, her opponent, and the player's box, where she'll turn around and do like this over and over and over again without engaging with the crowd. And not to be too hard on Pegula, there are any number of female players, and maybe I should write an article about this, but I just want these players to be able to use the energy from the arena and the crowd and help them help their game so that they can feed off of that energy a little bit more and it's a little less dry.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess that feeds into my thoughts on the quarterfinal where the crowd weren't quite getting behind Pagula as much as I thought they would be, considering she's American. And it was only until kind of back end of the second set where they started really getting behind her. And I was like, where was this the rest of the match? But that probably is because she was, as in fist bumping to her box the whole time. So if she's not actively trying to engage the crowd, then some of the crowd might just say, okay, well, it doesn't really grab their attention. They don't feel like the player wants it or needs it, or they don't want to give it. So that was interesting, and I wonder whether that might have helped a little bit. I know some players, well, most players feed off the energy. I wonder whether maybe she's the type of player that doesn't, but you almost feel like is there to be utilized to your advantage.
Exactly.
It's something for her to maybe look upon in the future. But yeah, she's so solid, isn't she? She really is. Power
Yeah.
baseline from the back of the court, solid on the serve and return, and interesting to see if she is able to make additions and tweaks to her game to improve even more and take the next step. Sabalenka had a pretty good tournament. I mean, maybe surprising to some because she hasn't had a great year, but equaling her result from last year, making the semi-finals, and also arguably, gave Swiatek the hardest match of the tournament, considering she was 4-2 up in the final set. She held serve, which is easier said than done. Obviously, she's in the final then, and who knows what happens there. But were you impressed with the way that she played, and also maybe a little bit surprised with her run? I mean, for one, I'm pretty happy to see her back playing some good tennis because I feel like she's pretty exciting to watch. But especially the match between her and Collins, I mean, that was a power-packed matchup.
Yeah, I was at that match, and I almost pulled my hair out because Danielle Collins put like 35, 37% of first serves in play. And that is so boring to watch. I mean, if you and my expectations were high, like you said, because these are two power players.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, when you're sitting there either watching a match either on TV or in person, one of the most dead periods of time is between first and second serve. So as a viewer or a fan, you're sitting there, you're ready to watch a point. The first serve does not go in. There's an average of, 10, 12 seconds that pass before the next ball is put in play. And not only did she put she couldn't make a first serve. Not only did she put an extremely low number of first serves in play, she double faulted a bunch of
Yeah.
times. So it was not the thrilling contest that I had hoped it would be, even though it went 3 sets, and then it pushed the Alcaraz match because of all that time.
Yeah.
It pushed the Alcaraz Cilic match to a point where I couldn't even stay for the whole thing. So I was frustrated. Danielle is another person who is extremely animated, but really only engages with her box. And she's got a really interesting personality.
Yeah.
Get to know us, Danielle, and let us get to know you. But Sabalenka played the last 2 sets of that match really patiently and very well. She went for it. She's a good heir apparent to Serena Williams because they both
Yeah.
have that power
Style.
game.
Yeah. Agreed.
Totally.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure. The style of play is quite similar. I doubt she's going to have the same success, but but
Right.
it's good to see her at least have that style. And there's not many players that have a very similar style, kind of as tall as Serena. A very similar kind of build as well, and the way that they kind of play is so similar. Of course, you've got other power hitters like an Osaka or Collins, but they're slightly different. So yeah, I agree for sure. And Serena, I guess, talking of Serena, I mean her swan song. Well, supposedly she said, "Oh, well, I really like Australia. I might be back," but, but I think let's just say it is. I mean, she played really well against Tomjanovic, I thought, considering how little tennis she played this year. She really went for it. Tomjanovic kind of stepped up and rose to the occasion, played really well. But what are your thoughts, I guess, on her US Open and also her decision to retire as well? Because my thoughts were if she'd played a few more matches, I don't think she would have won it, but she could have made a quarterfinal. She'd kind of played, say, 2 more tournaments in the year. But I felt she was just a little bit cold coming into it.
I think though that she needed this is it, like this is your swan song to be able to motivate her to do as well as she did. So she'll sit there and say, "Oh, if only I had started earlier preparing for this," but it's almost like to light a fire under her to do this by her own admission if you read the Vogue essay to get the fire lit under her. She needed this deadline or this end game of this is it. I really don't expect to see her back, just knowing what she's going through in her life. But that being said, I thought it was a really good ending for her. I mean, she was properly celebrated and feted, and the people who do love her, and there are many who don't, unfortunately, but the people who do love her were able to express their admiration and appreciation for her. And I thought it was a good final match to go out on because she fought. She fought off match points. She fought to the bitter end. She went out fighting, and that's who she was as a player. So, bravo, Serena Williams, on a great career.
Yeah, competitor to the last for sure. Yeah, I mean, some of the points and some of the exchanges were incredible in that match as well. And I really enjoyed watching it. I did the commentary for it as well. And I was just thinking that, we're really going to miss this. And hopefully, yeah, someone like Sabalenka can at least, give some sort of similarity to that style of play because, of course, when Serena was at her peak, everyone just wanted to blast everyone off court. Now it's a bit different with obviously Barty and Swiatek and the way they play, but it's always great to have different styles. And she's had a fantastic career. So yeah, who knows? I would imagine she's not going to be back, like like you're saying, but you just never know with some people when if they get the itch and they feel, oh, maybe just one more and see how it goes. But yeah, great career for sure. And then I guess finally the two finalists from last year in Raducanu and Fernandez not quite going according to plan and not replicating their results. I mean, wasn't really too surprising to me, but I mean, how did you see that one where you, again, the same boat that it wasn't to be? They're not going to be able to replicate that type of form. And they also haven't been in particularly good forms themselves this year anyway.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't paid that close of attention to Fernandez, but I have been watching Raducanu. I wanted to do this big piece on Raducanu going into the US Open because I got a lot of data on her from last year's run, and I was starting to go through it and analyze it when Serena retired. And I needed to write a couple of big retrospective pieces on Serena, so I had to drop the Raducanu stuff. But as I was plowing through, um, I think that a lot of people are talking about what's gone on in her off the court life, the coaching changes, the sponsorships, the sudden notoriety, all that. And I really just wanted to focus on what did she do well from a tennis standpoint last year when she made that incredible run versus what she's done since. And I think part of it has to do with her timing on the baseline. She's one of these players that's almost like a Jeannie Bouchard. I'm sorry to invoke that name, but she stands very close to the baseline and hits open stance and relies very heavily on her timing to be able to execute shots. Well, the US Open court speed and court surface is very specific to that surface. And as we know, the ball is very unique. It's a different kind of ball. So I think that those conditions last year were very favorable to her. And when she got a different surface and a different ball, her timing was messed up. And she's been working very hard, contrary to popular belief, because she's given herself blisters. She's been working very hard to regain what she had, when I think what she really needs to be doing is working smarter, not harder, and get with a program and a coach, and start analyzing some patterns of play that are more favorable to her, and don't just rely on this open stance situation.
Yeah, no, I don't actually have anything more to add to that, to be honest with you, because that's really well said, and thank you for the insight as well, because clearly um, you've done a lot of research and reading into it as well, and with your sources. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying about the favorable conditions last year, and then in terms of her tactics and the way she plays, I think it's a little bit one-dimensional. So maybe needs to add something to her game, and work smarter for sure. Because she's had a lot of issues with blisters, not just on her feet but on her hands as well. So and all these niggles, and it's her first full season. So I didn't really have any expectations at all of her this year as someone from the UK. So I'm not sure why other people did, because she played half a season last year after sitting at A levels here in the UK. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't going to be an incredible season. If it was, I mean, it would have been. I mean, it would have been a massive shock, in all honesty. So I'm more interested in seeing where she's going to be at. Maybe not even next year, but 2024 maybe onwards, and see. Okay, well, how's she now after the whole, I guess, celebration around her winning it. Now, okay, one US Open's gone, so there's a new winner. And okay, one more year, and then it's okay. This more of a distant memory. People are not talking about it as much, and she can kind of knuckle down as well mentally. That'll help as well, I'm sure. Amy, that's all from me actually on the women's side as well. Is there anything you want to touch upon before we wrap it up?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. It was an awesome tournament, and thanks for having me on, by the way.
No problem at all. You're always welcome on, as you know. And thanks for being on as always. Appreciate it. But fantastic tournament, as you said, Amy, as well. And I'm pretty happy as well to have a bit of rest, but also sad. It's almost like, when you're a child and you have exams and then you suddenly have the holidays. It's like, what do I do with myself? The day one of holidays is, what do I do with myself? And I feel like that at the moment. So at least I have this chat to to do as well, which is nice to at least round it up and relax it a little bit. But Guys, if you haven't done so already, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new as well. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave a rating and review. And yeah, hope everyone stays safe. And we'll see you on the next video. Thank you, Amy, so much as well. And hopefully we'll speak soon.